In 1925, the Phoebus cartel was formed. In a streak of capitalist genius, a group of wealthy business owners found a way to increase sales and revenue without introducing anything new to a product. What they opted to was quite the opposite. They realized that if a good's lifespan was actually shortened, people would have to buy it more often. They were the pioneers of what came to be known as planned obsolescence. So, what better way to test this business theory than with a product which was bought off the racks more than anything back in 1925? The light bulb. They sliced the lifespan of a single light bulb from the standard 2,500 hours to 1,000 hours. The Phoebus business group managed to increase the need for light bulbs by 250% by making the product quite literally worse. Through mutually agreed upon terms, they harmed nobody in the industry while playing a cruel joke on the consumer. The idea of market-based economics and capitalism, creating the best possible goods through competition, died that day. Thank you for watching, Tovarishi. I'd like to thank my patrons for... Oh, you want more information? Okay, sure. I guess I'm here to serve.
Money, power, women, drugs. Money, power, women, drugs. Money, power.
So where were we? Oh yes, the light bulb. Well, nobody could really do anything about the light bulb situation up until the beginning of World War II, when things got a bit more complicated. But nonetheless, the practice of planned obsolescence expanded to all industries. Let's take a look at shaving razors, for example, where instead of selling you one part which you can maintain for a while, you are given the option to just replace the blade all the time. Sure, this made the long-term use of the product a bit more convenient, but the original purpose of this idea wasn't your comfort, but to continuously increase profit and revenue for the company that had made it. While not necessarily defined as planned obsolescence, the two-part pricing system, as we have to call it, can be also seen in coffee machines and the need to buy specific branded capsules, video game consoles that make money out of every new game purchased, or the goddamn printers making you cash big bucks for what is inherently just a branded brick of paint. Speaking of which, special fuck you to HP. Because of you guys, back when I was a kid I got my ass whooped by my dad because I thought it was going to be a completely acceptable idea to print out at least 100 pics of naked chicks from his computer and his printer, not realizing afterwards that that shit cost as much as a month's rent. Another excellent example of planned obsolescence is nylon. Back in the day, this material was about to revolutionize the clothing industry, specifically women's stockings. Everyone wearing stockings nowadays knows they aren't really considered a long-term investment as they rip and tear all the time, and therefore need replacement all the time. What if I told you the brilliant market system found a solution to that a long time ago? Through nylon stockings which could hold together two running cars without ripping in the slightest. But then, the same market chose to abort this idea before it got any meaningful traction. Why? I think you've got it at this point, because if stockings don't rip, people would start buying them less and less, a scenario where quite literally the profit motive, the driving force of capitalism, is at odds with what it presents as its greatest strength: competition-based progress. DuPont, the maker of nylon stockings, soon told its scientists to go back to the drawing board, and the same people who made this revolutionary product intentionally dumbed it down. If we look at more modern examples and jump to the 2000s, classical planned obsolescence was still far from dead. The iPod, if you remember those ugly little overpriced MP3 players, had an irreplaceable battery. And guess what? It was intentionally made to last a set amount of time. It was proven in court. Apple, while espousing its green, hip, edgy aesthetic and a new frontier of just how much music you can listen to, put a timer on just how much music you can listen to. You just gotta love capitalism. Now, There are plenty of cheap products out there, which do break inherently due to the necessary cost cutting, which allows for their price to be where it's at. Hell, it's good that a lot of affordable options exist in an economy such as this one, because most people wouldn't be able to afford anything otherwise. One of the USSR's biggest flaws was its somewhat conscious choice to lack in consumer goods, which made the West seem as a far shinier world than it ever really was. Now, these examples should give you a bigger picture of just how little we know about the products we buy on the daily. But to understand planned obsolescence further, we must engage in some historical digging on our relationship with the non-living world. And no, not the undead, but objects, items, trinkets, and so on. According to Kamila Pope in her very insightful book linked below, we divide the reasons for planned obsolescence in three categories: anthropological and ethical reasons, sociological reasons, and economic reasons. In more primitive societies, there was a far closer and mystical relationship between nature and us. While today, all items created out of nature only carry as much value as its use value in said societies. In the past, items were buried with people, a practice which continues pretty much until today, because all items had a spiritual weight to them, connecting humans and the natural world. Hunter-gatherers resisted to switch to an agricultural mode of living for a very long time. But something else happened. When we entered agro-pastoral living off the land, you see, we were no longer a part of nature, a simple member, but its master, molding and adapting it to what we wished. This led to competition over the best lands and the first unification of multiple villages. Also, many were relocated from agro jobs to defensive or offensive soldier-like jobs. Once that system was intensified and we entered intensive modes of production like irrigation, changing crop mixes, and more intense farming, life turned from simple survival into something a bit more complex. Many centuries passed, and after the development of modernity, three types of needs were slowly created: basic, irreplaceable, and holy needs like water and food; cultural, linked to a sense of belonging and identity; and of the production system, used to maintain categories of at that time's primitive industries. Both basic needs and cultural needs have existed since the dawn of human history, whereas needs related to the system of production only began to demand a specific type of consumption with the onset of modernity. It is therefore possible to state that material culture and consumption are fundamental aspects of our society. However, only societies, principally capitalist and Western societies, have been characterized as consumer societies. The need for material well-being, and indirectly the consumption of what your tribe, your village, your town, your nation, your country, or your whole world economy creates, is perfectly natural and fine. The issue with modern consumer societies is that they quite literally push consumerism as not only the dominant cultural force, but the very pillar of our identity. I have touched on this before, but I'll repeat it here again. In order for the market system to survive, it requires literal eternal economic growth. This can only be assisted with massive unending amounts of consumption, both of large industry goods, but also small everyday items. The very nature of our system has trickled down to our everyday lives, turning us into not much more than garbage dumps for whatever the economy wants to dish out. When we pray to our gods, the conversation is unending. When we raise our children or look up to our parents, the relationship unfolds throughout a lifetime. But with purchasing culture, it ends the second we buy and consume the item. The thrill of acquiring a new gadget or house appliance is very real, but as old Slavic grandmothers like to say, all too temporary. Therefore, marketeers and advertising gurus, in their eternal drive to make us think of consumption as a never-ending process, introduced a new type of planned obsolescence: perceived obsolescence. As the consumer became far more informed on everything they bought, and as they inquired more and more on the longevity of items, the option of cleverly making your toaster or washing machine die after exactly 5 years couldn't quite cut it when it came to screwing over the customer. And while many insidious but intelligent engineers still manage to intentionally cut a product's life a bit shorter in the pursuit of more sales through software updates or non-backward compatible hardware, the main money nowadays is still in perceived obsolescence. The main aspect of the human experience most corporations proudly prey on is our need for self-expression. So what they did was introduce self-expression through consumption. The item no longer needs to break when we, as the working people of the world, have decided almost unanimously that buying the same product with the slightest of tweaks year in and year out is the way to go. Consumer credit offered by banks for people with no more than 200 USD in their bank account removed every excuse for the modern human to not buy into the latest and greatest trend. As our interpersonal experiences dwindle, and as we have less and less to talk about, when we have less time to dive into our deepest interests and passions, the market is here to provide. It will give you a conversation point about the new features of the latest Tesla. It will give you cultural identity by selling clothing brands nichely designed by big data analyzing clothing companies for your specific and oh so original and not in any way created by brands aesthetic of choice. It will fill that inevitable void brought on by a life of meaninglessness which most of us lead, with a few dopamine rushes whenever you buy a new fucking pair of kicks. But not everyone can possibly be buying into this. Well, we're on the internet, right? And the internet is ruled by the most oppressed class of people in the world, gamers.
With the glass ceiling broken, all the oppressed groups shall prosper, especially the most oppressed group of all, gamers.
And gamers, my tovarishi, are a perfect example of an audience so happy with reconsuming an incredibly similar product year in and year out. I mean, how do you explain the endless releases of COD for the past decade, or Assassin's Creed games before everyone stopped buying them and they had to slightly rehash the concept of the franchise? It's not just white American men buying new lawn decorations each year that are the victims of what is inherently propaganda disguised as advertising. It's you, it's me, it's everyone. So don't blame yourself for liking shiny things. The issue is systematic, my tovarishi, and so is the solution. So, what's the alternative? Well, my grandma has a washing machine that's lasted for 33 years. My other grandparents have the same fridge they bought in 1975. If you don't know, I'm from an ex-socialist country of Yugoslavia, and those products were developed during a time when production's main goal was not selling more, but selling better. In the DDR, for example, a country I'm very critical of, but a state with undeniable successes in certain fields, sanctioned the minimal lifespan of fridges at least 25 years. In 1981, the DDR created an ultra-long-lasting light bulb. Yes, we're back at the light bulbs. And when they went to an international trade fair, their Western colleagues told them, "Guys, you will literally make yourself unemployed." The engineers replied, "No, actually, by saving resources and not wasting money, we will get to keep our jobs." Two societies with two different outlooks, with two ideologies, and with two different fucking fridges. Westerners seem to really like going to Cuba and photographing themselves in supermarkets filled with the same looking goods. Well, gentlemen, your supermarkets are the same. You just put 5 different animals on your cereal boxes and call it diversity of choice. I have a business degree and worked in marketing, my friend. Trust me, your wealth is a TV ad. Now, there are differing perspectives on the idea of obsolescence, some of them not as ill-meaning as others. For example, during the Great Depression in New York, a gentleman had an idea on how to kickstart the economy. Bernard London suggested making planned obsolescence compulsory by law, allowing for eternal motivation for capital and an eternal source of labor for others. This would in turn create more money overall and give people the jobs they needed. Now, I have to admit that this idea would be brilliant if we lived in the fucking Rick and Morty universe. So back here in reality, Mr. Bernard, there are limited resources on a limited planet, so unless we want to commit societal suicide even quicker than we are doing now, we might want to leave that idea for 4500 AC. Another capitalist, Brooke Stevens, was a post-war industrial designer and ideologue of planned obsolescence. All his items were very interestingly designed and actually quite cute, but he always kept in mind planned obsolescence, rejected the idea of items lasting forever. Design and marketing always created a need for having the newest thing in consumers. It's thanks to people like him that we have terms like product life cycle, which is a polite way of calculating the estimated longevity of the item you're selling, when it's literally going to break. But no matter the perspectives, whether your argument comes from a place which wants to get people jobs the way Bernard's did, or just make more money the way Stevens's did, an unavoidable cloud hangs over the idea that consumption can and should be unlimited. A little thing called waste. So much waste that we can call it world-ending amounts of waste. So, where does the excrement of capitalism actually go? It would take me 5 videos and a budget far bigger than mine to fully dive into this global issue, so I'll stick to one type of waste: electronic waste. Hundreds of millions of electronic devices are dumped weekly on the shores of developing countries. Thousands of cargo ships move tons of waste in giant containers from one part of the world to another. Corrupt governments take their payouts from corporations as well as ministries and politicians from the capitalist West and East, and in return, they turn their countries into literal massive piles of garbage. It would be incredibly interesting to hear from capitalist libertarians on how they solved this issue in a non-regulated market, because even in one where there are laws prohibiting the export of electronic waste, it is still happening. So if we have created this dystopian reality behind walls of regulation, what would happen if we just let anyone and everyone do what they wish with their material waste? And yes, exporting electronic waste to developing countries is completely illegal, but these businessmen use a simple trick to define the trash as second-hand goods, manipulating their way around any potential limiting legislation. All they need is the people on the ground to close their eyes and allow the ships to keep coming in. The only good news in this whole situation is ironically very bad, because you see, the waste economy, as it's called, is coming to an end, as there's almost no space left for our garbage. So, the next time you see a corporation branding itself as green and transforming its products into recyclable and so-called sustainable modes of production, they're doing it not out of the kindness of their own hearts, but out of material need. Now, dear Tavarishi, let's wrap this one up. We learned that the profit motive leading to the best products is a mythical fabrication used to motivate us to support a world fueled by nothing more than petty greed. We've also seen that the market is incompatible with our planet, as limited resources would never sustain the idea of unending economic growth. And most importantly, and somewhat selfishly, when removed from any and all ideological weight, capitalism is, unironically, bad for consumerism. Who would have thunk? Thank you guys for watching, especially you guys that stuck through the whole thing. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my lovely patrons, especially Deep Red Wine, Desmond, Neil Surio, Achichi, Sem and Eggs, Crouton and Baguette, and Marussia Asarabakara. If you like what I make and would like to become a patron, I would be very grateful. For the price of half a can of beer a month, you can help me keep this channel up and running. If not, please share it with people you think could learn something out of it. Have a good one, Tavarishi.
La stagione, rivoluzione trionferà. Vangela rossa deve trionfare, Vangela rossa.